It's showtime.
Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and unfortunately, Saul Goodman things must come to an end, as not only is Better Call Saul now over, but the crap puns on the show are also at an end too. The finale is here, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking it all down, going through what happens, and also the Easter eggs in it. Also, if you want to support the show, we've just launched a Better Call Paul t-shirt over at our Shop Zero edition, which will be linked below. If you need a spoiler, then your chumps know who to call, and I hope you head over there to pick up this limited run t-shirt. Massively supports the channel, means I can buy myself a golden toilet, and it also helps videos like this get made. Now last week we saw Marion discovering the truth about Gene through Saul's old commercials. Even though she ended up calling the police, she still probably liked and subscribed, and this led to Jimmy going on the run once more. The preview had us focusing on his ditched car from earlier in the series, and over the top of this, we could hear him desperately trying to get himself a new identity.
Hoover, pressure pump, Max Extra, Model 60.
Now they sort of spliced two scenes together for that, with the Hoover call almost being a sort of what if that we never actually see play out. However, the car is there, which is very important to how we open things up. These calls were put in place when people wanted to get a new identity, and though Gene gets caught a lot faster than we thought, this idea of identity is very important to bear in mind. We finally see Jimmy rest on one come the culmination of the show, and for once he does the right thing. Now the colour also gave a clue to what time period we'd be in, and this is actually where we start things off. We open with a flashback to Season 5's episode Bagman, and catch Mike and Jimmy in the desert. This was one of the standout episodes in the series, and this entry very much feels like a time machine trip with us getting several cameos in it, such as Mike, Marie, Walt, Bill Oakley, Chuck, and a couple of other big characters. Time machines are a major talking point too, and we see Jimmy talking about them with Mike and Walt before Chuck picks up the book by H.G. Wells. This opening is a great way to start us off, and after finding a water tank, both Jimmy and Mike discuss regrets, the future, and it's basically just an introspective look at the characters. I love how Jimmy's water has a suspiciously yellow tint to it, and you might remember that Saul actually drank his own during the Bagman episode. Now these time machine conversations that appear throughout all take place at pivotal points in his life, and they're very much intersections in which we see how his regrets change. Jimmy says he wants to take the $7 million, invest it in crypto, take the $7 million, spend 6 of it on building a time machine, and use the other $1 million to go and get rich. He then asks Mike what he'd do if he had one, and he says he'd go back to March 17th, 1984, aka the day that he took his first bribe. This had a massive impact on the character, as not only did it lead him down the road to becoming a criminal, but it also led to the death of his son Matt. He also says he'd go forward to see how people were doing, clearly referring to his family and those he cares about. Jimmy, on the other hand, is all about the dough, and he'd rather go back in time and invest the other $1 million into Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. It's very much just the fantasy case of using a time machine to go back and win the lottery, because all that Jimmy cares about is his money. Any normal person stuck in this situation would have a lot of things they'd change, but at this point he's so materialistic that he believes wealth is the key to happiness. And from here, we cut to the titles. In this we can catch the Isotopes air freshener from Jeff's cab, and this was also something that very much led to Gene's downfall. Had he not gotten the cab, he probably would have been stuck as the manager of a Cinnabon, but it gave him an avenue where he went back to old habits. I also view this as being the moment that Jimmy was caught, as it set up the dominoes that led to everything falling apart. We then jump immediately to the other side of last week, with us even hearing the door close behind him as he bolts out of Marion's. She describes his car and also the direction that he's going in. He grabs everything he can from his home, and I love how he has a stack of flip phones put up in his cupboard. Not only is this a really cool nod to him selling phones earlier in the series, but it also shows just how prepared that he is in case it all goes up. Jimmy ends up trying to call out to my man the Hoover guy, but unfortunately he messes up and he gets caught. Now often, when you hear of criminal masterminds being captured, you'll hear how they're found in some of the worst circumstances trying to evade the law. This is very much the case with Jimmy, who, due to his confession, will be labelled as having one of the biggest drug empires in America. He's found in a dumpster after failing to escape, and him stooping to the death shows how far he's fallen from his mansions and sexy suits. Now, in some of the best foreshadowing I've ever seen, episode 1 in this season actually start off with a shot of his cardboard cutout being put into a dumpster. It really shows the attention to detail that the series carries, and how it sets things up far in advance. I love this moment, and it gives me chills going back to watch this to see how it hinted at what was to come.
Party is minding my own business. You are under arrest. But Better Call Saul.
Now Jimmy's downfall is also echoed in the commercials that we see the police watching. We can hear his over-the-top bravado narration about how he can get anyone out of jail, whilst we see him looking at what would normally be a one-way ticket. He gets his one phone call, and he uses it to contact Cinnabon to tell them that they're gonna need a new manager. Got lots of flashes here of Gus calling to make sure Los Pollos Hermanos had a manager in place after he was shot, and it's nice that they show the similarities in the characters when they were at their lowest points. Now Jimmy demands another phone call after seeing a carving about a lawyer doing what? And he reaches out to Bill Oakley. Better Call Bill spin-off coming soon, baby, guarantee it. Now, as we saw earlier in the season, he's now switched sides to become a defense attorney. He ends up taking Jimmy's case, and I think it's great how Saul sells him on how big it'll be for him.
Bang bang!
He's taken down a corridor in cuffs, and this moment beautifully parallels when he's escorted to the court. Now at this point we get a cameo by Marie, and the authorities basically want to throw the book at him. Initially he's facing life plus 190 years, but Saul comes out on top. He's initially offered a deal of 30, but he asks for Marie to come in after referring to her as Schrader's widow. Really tragic way to see her labelled like this, and watching her talk about Hank and Steve Gomez is really heartbreaking to watch. Reminds you of how much they were really the good guys, and how Hank would always come in with a smile and a joke, even in the darkest times. I miss you so much. Now she says that Saul did it all for the money, further linking back to the first time machine conversation. She's clearly devastated, but Saul twists things so that he's seen as a victim just like her. It's incredible watching him go to work, and he mentions the name Mayhew, which was the surname of Badger from Breaking Bad. Saul talks about being taken to the desert, and he basically spins it to say that he feared for his life the entire time. He also touches upon big moments from Breaking Bad, such as the 10 men being murdered in prison at the same time, and also brings up Dan from the series. The prosecutor asks him if he thinks the jury are going to buy this, but he smiles and says,
One. All I need is one.
Now it turns out that the prosecutor has never lost a case before, and this has given him not only an ego, but also the fear that the first L is right around the corner. He's well aware that there's potential that Jimmy can drop this sob story in court and win one of them round. Though Marie doesn't want them to negotiate, he ends up working with Jimmy, and they cut his sentence down to 7 years. Jimmy is so in control of the entire thing, he even picks not only his prison, but also the wing that he'll be on. He chooses the only federal institution with a golf program, and brings up Bernie Madoff. In case you don't know, Bernie was the ex-chairman of the Nasdaq Stock Exchange, and he also made off with the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, totaling in at a whopping $64 billion. No, compose myself. Now Jimmy, it's so bad. Now Jimmy will do anything to avoid Gen Pop, and this is important to bear in mind to show what he's sacrificing in the end. He gets too arrogant though, and in order for more stuff like ice cream, he says he'll offer up info on Howard's death. However, they reveal that Kim already gave everything up, which sweeps Jimmy off his feet. From here we cut to Walt and Jimmy just before they were shipped off to their new lives. In the case of both, they ended up coming back, and we also get a time machine conversation here. Walt at one point looks at his watch, which was gifted to him as a present by Jesse in Breaking Bad. This is a TAG Heuer Monaco that was given to the Monaco Grand Prix winner in 1969. It was also worn by Steve McQueen's character in the 1970 film Le Mans, and it has a lot of history attached to it. Now the one Walt has is a 2004 reissue, and he showed it to Skylar, saying that the man who tried to kill him once ended up giving him as a present, and this showed that she would forgive him one day too. Here it's used in a number of ways to show how long they've been waiting, to tie in with the time machine, and it's got some really nice symbolism to it. Jimmy wants to run the thought experiment again, but Walt wants to cut the BS, and he disregards time travel as being scientifically impossible. He realizes that Saul just wants to talk about regrets, and he brings up grey matter. Walt blames his old pals for kicking him out of the company because of how rich he'd end up becoming. This mind state very much explains why he ends up tormenting them in the finale of Breaking Bad, as he sees them as artfully removing him. Saul then leaps to his feet and starts brainstorming a plan of how he could have helped, but he's quickly shut down. The questions then turn to Jimmy, and he brings up how he slipped once and hurt himself, and you could say, yeah, he was slipping Jimmy.
Ha ha!
Come on, that was good. Anyway, this leads Walt to saying,
So you were always like this?
and from here we cut to Jimmy on the plane, still using his mouth to get what he wants, and he finds out about what Kim gave up. He also discovers that Cheryl got the info too, so she can now open up a civil suit. This gets Jimmy's brain spinning, and he says that he's got one more thing to trade on Kim. Cut to her back at the lunch table with her co-workers, and it's clear that she's just not happy. She ends up walking out of her job, and we follow her as she volunteers at a pro bono law firm. Though it's not much, it shows that she's slowly back on the road to becoming her old self again, but this is crushed when Suzanne calls her to tell she may be implicated in the new proceedings. Really devastating watching her learn this, and I was kinda worried that Kim's life could end up being destroyed too. She very much had her redemption arc and handed over everything on Howard, so seeing that things could get worse was really nerve-wracking. Now we see Saul rock up in the shiniest suit he could find, looking like his old sleazeball self. However, the guilt starts to wash over him as he sees Kim and Marie, and this very much plays into his next move. He goes under the name Saul Goodman, and we watch as he goes off into his sub-story after the judge asks why he's getting off so lightly. This is verbatim to how he said it in the prosecution office, and it's all clearly an act. However, he quickly shifts gears, and he starts lying to the court in order to take the fall. He says he was the one who helped build up Walt's drug empire, and says that he lied about Kim's involvement because he wanted her to come to court. We saw how he tried to save her with Lalo, and this is very much the same thing here, with him saving the person he loved. Was trying not to cry watching my dude doing the right thing, and he does it to make sure that Kim is okay. Now he next brings up Howard, and his voice cracks as he credits Kim for starting over again and actually doing the right thing and handing herself in. We then get some great iconography here with a focus on the exit sign overhead, and he goes off to talk about Chuck and how he hurt him. He destroyed the law for Chuck, which led to him ending his own life, and he finally takes responsibility for it. The scene then gives us a Chuck flashback to Jimmy helping him out whilst he still had his electricity phobia. Chuck tells him that if he doesn't like where he's heading, that there's no shame in going back and changing things, which very much plays into the fall that he takes here. Chuck picks up his copy of the time machine, and he then goes to bed. Now this book also popped up in episode 1 of this season, and we could see it as the mansion got raided. It's such amazing foreshadowing of what was to come, and Jimmy very much used his confession as a way to go back and change things. Though not literally a time machine, it corrected some of his regrets, and we watch as he's taken to a terrible prison. One of the other prisoners recognizes that he's Saul Goodman, and though he corrects this to Jimmy, the legend lives on. The entire bus starts a chant that brings a sad smile to Jimmy's face, and inside the prison we cut to him flipping dough. The scene very much here resembles the way that the stuff in Cinnabon was shot, showing how, no matter what path he took, he still would have ended up doing this. Really poetic, and we watch as he's called out to meet Kim. This scene mirrors how they'd meet in the car park and share cigarettes, and we even get some similar iconography to that. The scene genuinely gave me goosebumps throughout it with its long pauses, and you can feel how much they really care about each other, but how they know they'll never get their happy ending. The flame lights up in another burst of colour, showing how this old flame, brings the colour back into his life. We learn that Jimmy is now doing 86 years, but with good behaviour, who knows? Now, obviously, he's not going to get that much time off his sentence, so it's very bittersweet. He's still going to spend the rest of his life in jail, and sadly, I think that Jimmy knows it. However, he sees her on the outside, going off to now live her life free of the torment that she could have faced. Jimmy shoots his gun fingers at her as she departs, and I'm not crying, cut this. Now, anyone who's had a breakup where you just want the other person to be happy can relate a lot to the sorrow displayed here, and that closes out Better Call Saul in what was a fitting but also devastating end of the show. I think we all knew that Jimmy would get his comeuppance, but we can take some solace in knowing that at least Kim will be okay. Now, as for my thoughts on this series, I think that Better Call Saul always had a difficult job because it was obviously a prequel/sequel to one of the best TV shows of all time. However, they managed to do what so many others failed to, and at points, I actually think this was better than Breaking Bad. The early seasons are good, but I think it takes a couple of them before we really get into what made the show must watch, whereas here it hit the ground running for me early on and maintained a consistent level throughout. The final season has been no different, and it's arguably had the most impactful moments from the entire series, playing out almost back-to-back at points. There was of course Nacho's death, Howard's, Lalo, the breakup of Kim and Jimmy, Gene going back to his old ways, and several big moments that made this an almost masterpiece in storytelling at points. Now, I've often said that prequels are difficult to do because we already know where the story eventually ends up. However, whereas most fail to utilise this, Better Call Saul does because we worry that our favourite characters might die, and that will explain why they're not in Breaking Bad. On top of this, there's also so many great performances and memorable characters. You can pretty much pick out any member of the cast, and chances are they'll have hit a home run at some point. The actors behind this show really sold everything, and there were so many moments where so little was spoken, but it spoke so much to what the characters were going through. That's why I really loved it, and why I think the series has been one that I'll probably go back to and rewatch because of the quality it delivered. Sadly, it's all over now, but I hope you enjoyed our breakdowns on the second half, and hopefully I'll see you around on the channel for more coverage on our other shows. We are in a competition right now and giving away 3 copies of Top Gun Maverick on the 15th of September, and all you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the finale. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at HeavySpoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of Westworld, which will be linked on screen right now. We went over the full finale, talking about all the things in it, and yeah, what could be happening next time, which I'm not even sure if I'm right, but it's worth discussing anyway. If not, then thanks for sticking through the video. I hope you have a great week, and yeah, take care of yourself. Peace.